Last night I had the window open, light breeze coming in, and the sound of rain the whole night long. I love nights like that, and mornings like that too. The rain continued well into mid-morning today, and it's a fall rain. Brings along that crisp fall air that I yearn for throughout most of this summertime. I am a fall person. In fact, if you had to rank my seasons, I would have to say fall, winter, spring, summer. I know that's backwards for many of you, but for me, that's what I like. I love the warmth of a fireplace and the comfort of jeans and a sweatshirt. The leaves falling on the ground and the crunch of them under your feet as you're hiking a mountain trail. There's so many things that are beautiful about the fall. Today, one of those things, of course, for me is football. And I have the Broncos game on right now. They are playing Tampa Bay and winning right now 14-0. Yes, I know what you're thinking. If you've listened to me before, I am a Chiefs fan. And how could I be a Broncos fan too? Well, I live in Denver. I used to live in Kansas City. And before that, I used to live in Chicago. So I have three teams: the Bears, the Broncos, and the Chiefs. Although I've been mostly following the Chiefs lately and will still root for them when they take on the Broncos. But, you know, there's no rules in life. No rules. Well, people think there are rules. You know, and people assign rules. But I'm just saying in general. When it comes to how many teams you get to follow in football or in your favorite sport, there are no rules. I follow three teams: Chiefs, then Broncos, then Bears right now. And I have fun doing that. So I got the fire on in the fireplace, and the creek's flowing behind the house. I can hear it. Murphy's crashed out on the floor here. My wife has gone off to her mom's for a bit, but they'll be back mid-afternoon, and I got a roast going in the Instapot. Yes, I put a roast in. I am that talented. Actually, I put the Instapot bowl in the Instapot cooker and turned it on. My wife did all the prepping. But, I'm going to give her credit for that. But I do cook. And that's going, and we'll have a roast going on here in a little bit. And boy, that'll be good. So I invite you to join me in a comfy chair with a warm fire, a good game on in the background, and a nice discussion. This is Dee, and welcome to Uneven. One of the things I noticed watching football is the differentiation that the players can have. For the most part, the players are on the field, two different teams of 11 each, just going at each other. And sometimes very aggressively and sometimes violently, to where the bodies are slamming 200, 300 pounds at a time, hitting each other, tackling each other, intercepting the ball from each other. It's very aggressive. It's sometimes violent. It's what this sport is. Yet, when the game's over, there's some hard feelings sometimes, but for the most part, these guys are still friends. And they can still be friends. They can still talk to each other and reminisce about things. They could even give credit sometimes for a good play that one did on the other person. And I miss that in life. I feel like we may have lost some of that in our society as of late. And of course, I'm using this as is it a metaphor or an allegory or analogy? I never get those straight, but I'm using this to kind of ease into the topic I wanted to talk about today. I came across a couple of videos this morning that kind of kicked this into high gear. It was a panel of people talking politics, and they were asking about why people were afraid to talk, especially at work and other environments, and why they were afraid to speak their mind. And it was interesting to see what some of the people from all different parties and different belief systems had to say. And most people there were cautious about speaking, especially the older people on the panel. People more of my generation were more cautious about speaking their mind. And I looked up some information and saw another video or two, and it kind of got me thinking. And I wanted to talk about. I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time on this podcast. And yes, this is about controversy. Yes, this is about politics. But I am approaching it from what I hope is more of a objective overview. And I'm not picking a side here. I'm more just talking about how did we get here? What's it like for many people? And maybe what we can do to try to open up communication and not be so polarized, not be so divisive, because I believe that's causing anxiety. It's causing stress. And for so many of it, I know it is for me. I've talked with many people who are feeling this. This is the unspoken, I think, issue that so many of us are dealing with. Many of us feel we can't speak our mind due to repercussions. There's too much risk involved. And it could be too much risk of losing a family member who may disagree with us and may be causing strife in that relationship. It may be risk of getting a bad grade on a paper at college. It may be risk of losing your job at work. There's a lot of risk that comes with speaking your mind. But I don't know that that's beneficial to us to suppress what we think and what we say. I'm the last person to judge anybody in this regard because I've been doing this for a long time. I still am an independent. I'm pretty moderate, but I have some issues that I feel quite strongly on. I'm human. We all do that. I mean, I don't think you can judge me on that one too much. I have issues that I am very strong on. And those get under my skin, and those hit me, and those hit me at an emotional level. And for a long time, I avoided things. In fact, for 5 years, I didn't watch the news because I got so emotionally, what's the term for it? Distressed by what was on the news. And this was, when I came off the drugs around 2014, it was that first 5 or 6 years when I came off of benzodiazepines. And I was so heightened. My system was so heightened from anxiety and stress and everything. And I just couldn't handle it. I needed to block out things. I needed to distract myself. I needed to isolate myself. I needed to stay away from things. But then slowly over the last few years, I've come back into things. I've become more one with the world. I've started to see what's going on. I've started to participate and check out news and do other things. And now I'm more involved. Maybe too much so. Maybe too much so. That's probably a factor. One of the things that kept sticking in my brain most of that time was, where should I stand? Where should I be? When is the right time to speak up and share your thoughts on something? And when is the right time to say, now's not the place? And you know me, I'm a person of balance. There's probably a little of both. I know the saying. What was the saying? I looked it up here. What was it? It was, I have some notes. Oh, here it is. It was a quote that said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." That was attributed to Edmund Burke per a JFK address back in '61, but they don't really know exactly if that person said that. But basically it's saying, evil will prevail if you stand by and don't speak your mind, if you stand by and don't do anything to stop the evil. There's only one problem with that, and this is the problem that hits me all the time. What if you're wrong? What if what you are claiming is evil is not evil, and your speaking out is the evil? Why do we always see ourselves as being the 100% accurate, knowledgeable person, and this other person as the one that's wrong? And that's one of the things I've had with the extreme push of activism that's been in our world today. Everybody, you got to get out there and make social change. You got to get out there and make governmental change. You got to go out there and make fiscal change. You got to go out there and change the world for the better. What they're really saying is, you got to get out there and change the world to be more like what I want it to be. And let me tell you how to change things so it'll be more like what I want. But what if what you want or this other person wants isn't necessarily what's best for everyone? or for the majority of people or for society? I think those things. I get caught those things. So then, does standing up against evil make sense if you don't necessarily know for sure that that other side is evil? And that seems to be where we kind of caught ourselves in these days. Let me talk through a little bit of this. This is a topic, like I said, I've been wanting to talk about for a while. But it's basically, how do we speak our mind? Do we speak our mind? And is it important that we speak our mind? And these are the things I wanted to address. I came across a study this morning as I was looking this up, and I decided I wanted to talk about it, so I pulled up a quick study. I came across a study from 2021 on PR Newswire from Crucial Learning. It's a Crucial Learning study. And it was of 1,300 people in 21. And they found that 9 out of 10 people felt emotionally or physically unsafe to speak their mind more than once in the past 18 months. So 90% of the people felt emotionally or physically unsafe to speak their mind. And I could just imagine there's so many different reasons. 2 of the big issues at this time, now this was, 3 years ago, so was political and social issues. 74% said that they were not comfortable speaking out on political and social issues. And this was also at the heightened blah, 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 at the beginning of the early years of COVID, of course, and 70% talked about COVID being an issue. And those were the big divisive things at the time, political and social issues, and then COVID-19. So by far, the majority of people were not comfortable speaking out on those things. And instead of voicing their opinions or concerns, the people in the study resorted to unhealthy behaviors. Some were staying silent but feeling inauthentic, 65% of them. 47% were avoiding people. 42% silently fumed and stewed over their opinions but didn't speak out. 39% were ruminating about all the things they'd say as if they had the courage to say them. I did that. That's me. I'm warts and all. You know me. I'm going to speak of my problems. I'm one of those people that underneath is fuming, but I don't know if it's courage. Maybe it is lack of courage, but lack of will at that time to speak out due to the consequences of speaking out. And 14% severed relationships because of this. To get an understanding of what some of these people were thinking and how this affected them, I'm going to read 2 of the examples from this study, and then we'll talk about some other things related to it. But here's 2. This is related to COVID-19, and I think this is a good one to talk about because it's not as heightened of an issue right now as it was, although it still is pretty divisive. But I think it really summed up the time, and it's a good way to look at how these 2 groups of people saw this issue. And in fact, I totally get both sides of this argument. So the first person said this. This was quoted out of this article. My closest friends are convinced that anti-vaxxers are all ignorant fools who can't understand science and are most likely evil white supremacists bent on destroying the world. When they get together in a group, they all make clever jokes about how awful these people are. The thought that if they speak up, they will think of me that way as horrible. I can't speak up, so I'm a little frozen. I just sit quietly until the conversation moves on. So that's the first one. Does that sound like anybody else here felt something like that in the last several years? The second one reads this way. Since COVID, my mother has surprised the family 4 times with the news that she's rented an Airbnb for us. My dad has cancer and is supposed to follow guidelines for unvaccinated people. When we tell Mom what we think, she calls everyone selfish and gets aggressive. I've seen this everywhere. I've seen this in my family on COVID. I had this. I was going back and forth on COVID the whole time. I could see both sides. I still see both sides. And it's one of those things, and that goes with the social issues and the political issues too. I really, really try to see both sides, but boy, I don't always. And I get worked up sometimes, and I get mad sometimes, and I fume sometimes. And sometimes I do speak out. One of the things that I've seen a lot of from like the two political sides, and I'm going to use the U.S. here as an example, but here we have the left and the right, more liberal, more conservative, however you want to identify. I'm just going to use left and right, since I think most of us understand what that means. But one of the things that's feeding our polarization, I think, is the labeling. We so quickly label a person with an opposing viewpoint as this or as that, when we really have no clue about that person. We don't know anything more than that sentence they said. I think this is dangerous. We start to demonize and even dehumanize a person or a group of people. We label them as all bad just because they had a viewpoint on an issue that's different than mine. And that doesn't make sense to me. I believe the majority of us agree on some basic core ideals. I really believe that when you get underneath all the rhetoric and all the name calling and all this other stuff that's going on, when you get below all that, we have very similar, I think, core ideals. I think most of us think killing another person in general is bad, except in an extreme case, as if, that person's trying to kill you. Then sometimes that's okay. But I think that's something most of the time we can agree on and we can build on. I think there's a lot of things that we agree on. We think people should have equal opportunities for the most part. And I think we should strive for that. I think there's some core things that most of us really agree on. Where we disagree is on how we legislate that, how we put that into practice, how that affects our companies, how it affects our colleges, how it affects our schools, how it affects our rules we put in place, how it affects our society and how we treat one another. That's where we seem to differ. But we forget that at the bottom of all this, we probably aren't that far apart. And maybe we are on some things, but I think our core values aren't that far apart personally. In fact, that video I was watching this morning, I realized that one of the things that happens is that guttural reaction. I think it was shempa. Actually, I think it's shempa is the word I'm looking for. There was, I listened to a lot of Buddhist meditation when I was coming off my dependence on benzodiazepines. It helped me get through that. And I listened to a lot of, I'm going to forget, Pema Chodron. That's it. I almost forgot her name, but I didn't. Pema Chodron's work. And she did a whole lecture, and one of the keys of there was shempa. And shempa was this guttural reaction you have to something almost before somebody even says it. And boy, I have that. In fact, this morning on that video, there was a woman on that panel who said something, and almost before she even said the words, I knew what she was going to say, and I had this guttural reaction, and for the next several hours, I was a little worked up because of it. And I probably didn't really hear what she said, because my emotions kicked in and kind of blinded me. I think that happens with a lot of us. And we have trouble sitting there and hearing that person talk and really trying to process what that person said, because this fog overcomes us of emotion and it blinds us, because this doesn't feed with our narrative. It doesn't feed with what we think. And so we don't wind up opening up the room for dialogue. We don't wind up opening up and really hearing where the person's coming from and trying to figure. It doesn't mean you have to give up your ideals or give up your values at all. In fact, it may strengthen those. What it means is you open up a little bit and listen and hear. And we'll get into that a little bit. Those are some things I wanted to talk about. But I had that, and I realized that guttural reaction, that shempa, we might call it, whatever it is based on my experiences, my history, what I've seen and what I've been through. And I have a gut reaction. I have a hot button to certain issues. But when I back away from that and I try to analyze it more objectively from a more rational side of my brain, then I try to think and say, wait a minute, maybe there are two sides here, and I need to, if I want her to hear me about how I see this, I need to also hear how she sees it. And I think that's important. And I think that comes down to, when do we really speak up, and do we speak up? And if you have that, like that survey was saying, so many people just stew, and the anger and the irritation rises, and there's no release valve because they're afraid to say anything. Now, I don't think lashing out, this release valve, is a good thing, but I do think talking about it in respectful methods and venues is a good thing, because it allows you to do two things. One is vent your frustrations, if you can do that in a way without attacking someone. And it allows you to hear how somebody else feels about that and what their perspective is. So when do you speak up? This is the one thing that I keep dealing with all the time, is when do I speak up? I mean, should I speak up now? And I've had this happen. I actually had in a meeting, about a month ago or so, I was in a meeting. I got a lot of meetings, so it's all these different organizations I'm tied into with the work I do. But I was in this meeting, and I worked with these people for some time. And we kind of closed it out. At the end, they were all, we kind of chat and we talk to each other. We know each other pretty well. And at the end, one of them mentioned something about something political, about a political candidate. You might guess who. I'm just going to say it was a political candidate. They're in the U.S., there's two big political candidates right now, so you might guess it might be one of them. And was saying some disparaging things about that candidate, and in a row. And I was kind of like, and I was hearing that, and then somebody else was piping in, and somebody else was piping in, and out of like 7 of us, I started to realize, okay, I don't agree with this, but like 3 or 4 of them are kind of getting on the bandwagon. And I normally, and in the past, have always just let that go. And maybe that's the right thing. I think sometimes you have to decide when that's the right thing. But I think we also have to decide when we're going to speak up. Because if we don't speak up, people assume we're on the same page with them, I think is what happens. Our silence is affirmation. Or at least people seem to assume our silence is affirmation. So I finally said something, and this is what I said in the meeting. I said, I just want everybody to know here, I need to say something. I said, this is a little awkward for me to say this, but I need to say something. And just let you all know that just because some of us are silent does not necessarily mean we agree with you. And the room went silent. And with the person that started that conversation later, I had a conversation with this person, and we actually had a great conversation. And this person knew probably where I stood on this issue, and I knew where this person stood on this issue, and we understood each other, and we're just as good friends as we were. And I think with a lot of people that can happen. But I also think it could have gone south, and it could have gone the other way. And maybe some other people in that meeting, maybe I'm not as close to anymore because I spoke out and said something. I think the only way to probably ease this is we have to speak our minds, at least sometimes. We can't stay silent anymore. At least I don't feel that way. I'm not telling anybody else what to do. I'm struggling with this myself, but I just feel like you have to weigh what's the risk. I know many people who are at jobs right now. I won't say who, but I know many people who are at jobs right now that repeatedly cannot speak their mind in a meeting. Repeatedly. And really want to. But they know they can't because powers that be in their department or in their company know that they would not agree with that, and they don't want to risk losing their job. They don't want to risk being demoted. They don't want to risk losing good jobs or good promotions. And they believe this would lead to that. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. And I think we have to find a way to get past that. So I'm really glad I spoke up. And since then, I've spoken up a couple other times in other meetings with other groups. But the trick is, I've always done it with two things in mind, from a place of kindness and respect. And said, look, I just want you to understand that maybe not everybody agrees with this ideology or with this thought or with this opinion. And maybe we continue to not talk about that. You know where I'm at now. I know where you're at now. And it's okay if we don't go further down this road. Maybe that's the better, course of action. But at least you now know that not everybody in this room agrees with you just because they haven't said something. Okay? We can get so caught up in an ideology that we believe, well, my gosh, if nobody speaks up, they all must be on board with me because, I know how right I am. I know how absolutely right what I'm thinking is. So how could they not be on board with this? They're just not saying anything right now. And, maybe nodding their head or just, stone-faced. I don't know. But that brings me to one of the key things about all this. And this is the hardest thing. This is the hardest thing, I think, for us to pay attention to. But this one I want all of us, including myself, to remember. You may be wrong. In fact, you probably are. That's right. And I'm speaking to myself too here. Odds are, when there are two opposing sides that are diametrically opposed, odds are the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. Usually. Maybe it's leaning a little more to this one side, or maybe it's leaning a little more to this other side. But it's usually somewhere in the middle. Which means I'm wrong at least to a degree, and the other person's wrong at least to a degree. Sometimes I think we need to step back and think about that. I never want to be so arrogant that I believe I am 100% right. I know I'm not always right. And if you don't believe that you're always been right about your values and beliefs and what you stand for, is just look at your values and beliefs now versus 10, 20, 30 years ago, depending on how old you are. I look at my values when I was 18 and 20 compared to my values now. They are different. I mentioned I've been independent my whole life politically, but I've been all over the maps. I have voted for, presidents from all parties and independent parties in between. I've been around long enough to do that. So I've changed my mind. And if that's the case, then how can I be so absolutely sure this time I'm right? And I think that's something to keep in mind. One of the things that I keep looking at as far as why we are so divided right now and why this is so crazy right now, and it seems in our society and why these numbers are all over the map, is that I think it comes back to this whole internet digital media thing. And I think the media and the internet really feed off this. And I feel almost like we as humans are an experiment in progress by media and digital media just to manipulate. Not that there's all these necessarily people behind it pulling the strings. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. I'm not getting into conspiracy theories. But there is a fact. And the fact is, most social media and most of the media thrive on disconnect. They thrive on conflict. They thrive on controversy. This is what gets eyeballs to look at their content. This is what gets us to pay attention to what they're saying. They thrive on negativity. And whether consciously or unconsciously, they talk us into more negativity, into more us versus them thinking, more divided thinking. And this is how we wind up treating one another. And I think that's dangerous because there's a dramatic shift that has happened. Well, we have not gotten along in the past politically, and there have been some pretty divided races in this country and other countries. And politics have always been heated, but never at this level, at this scale. And the key difference is how we communicate now. We now communicate in real time with the world via a little computer in our hand. An ability we never had before. Everybody has an opinion, and now everybody has a way to share that opinion. But unfortunately, most of the opinions that are shared are the extreme opinions, which is actually the minority of people. And then you have bots that come in and feed off of that. And then you have the media that comes in and feeds off that looks for the extremist messages and then convinces everybody that, oh, by the way, you better believe this because the other group believes this, which makes them evil and means we have to either convince them they're wrong or wipe them out. That can get dangerous. And I think the internet feeds. I'm not saying the internet's all bad or all good. It's done some amazing things. I think more negative over positive personally, but that's just who I am. And I'm not trying to put all this on their shoulders. But it is a significant difference in what's happened in our society. And that's one of the biggest differences. And I think it's making it's throwing gasoline on the fire. So I want to close with two things. One, I want to talk about what I'm developing right now in the community. And I then want to close with maybe some suggestions about how to have these conversations and where we should go from here. So first off, I mentioned this in a blog post, not blog posts. What are these? These are podcasts. Boy, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I mentioned this a little while ago in a podcast episode, only a couple times ago. I introduced this new community. And I'm working nonstop on it. The only time I take the break from that is to record a podcast to keep that moving forward like I'm doing now. But I'll be back on it full time again probably this evening and tomorrow morning and nonstop getting it up and ready. And I'm getting a lot of pages built and it's looking good. And I'm loving this. I'm loving this. So I really hope you all come join this, be part of this community. And these are topics, yes, that we can talk about. Yes. We can talk about these here. I know. The Benzo Free podcast I did for years was pretty much apolitical. I always steered away from politics. I just thought it was a smart thing to do. I know people were so strong on that, and I think that was the right thing to do, and I still do that there. With Uneven, I want to be more open. I want to be more free to talk about what I want to talk about. And I will sometimes take on a side on a divisive issue. I'm still being mostly Switzerland here, neutral as much as I can. Oh, I hear you. Here, as I'm talking to you, I'm going to let Murphy out. But I'm still trying to take, I still want to approach all this through this podcast and on the community, online community, from a place of moderation and centrist, because that's really where I want to come from as our site as a whole, is we're a site that welcomes all people from different viewpoints. Do you want to go outside, Murph? Okay. You ready for a bark? 3, 2, 1. Go. There we go. As soon as I open the door, I saw the dog and person walking behind our house, and I knew the instant I slid that door open, he barks before he even leaves the step and lands on the porch and gets out to the grass, and then I have to go out and wrangle him back in because this is Murphy. But Murphy's our mascot. Murphy is the mascot of the Uneven podcast, and he's the mascot of our Uneven community. In fact, Murphy has his own page. I'll tell you more about that. It's a surprise thing, but he has his own page. Murphy, let's go back inside. No, come on. I now have my dog by his collar, and we are walking back inside. Yes, you bark too much, buddy. You can't bark at everybody that goes by. People don't like it. Go back inside. That's something else we got to work on, his barking, but we'll get there. Anyway, back to my topic. So the community will have all these different spaces, subspace, places, space you can talk to, blah, blah, blah. Backing up, I mentioned, really quick. Sorry, when I'm wrangling my dog in, I get a little distracted and all this kind of stuff. And I lose my place. But really quick, this is going to be all about the community. I just want to say real quick, I'm excited about this because this is a place we can talk about some of this. This is a place we can talk about some of this. In fact, on the community, we're going to have different spaces on there. There's a space you can talk anxiety, space for caregivers, a space for benzos. We have spaces. But then there's also these topic spaces. And one of these is called opinion. And that's where I want to set up, and I'm sounding incredibly naive here, I know that. I want to set it up for a respectful discussion of the issues, of whatever it is that we want to talk about. Primarily, of course, things related to mental health and anxiety and stuff like that, but any topics game. Now, we're going to have some guidelines of how to treat each other and how to go about this, but I truly believe, and this is from the core of everything, and this feeds to why I'm doing this. I truly believe that silence is not the answer anymore. For a long time, I just wanted to stay out of it and leave it alone, but unfortunately, things didn't get better in my mind. And I think I need to speak my mind more freely, but from a place of respect. And that's how this group's going to lead, which means, no personal attacks. We can debate issues, but not people. And I'm going to set that up. Anyway, I'm not going to say too much more, but I just want to let you know that's going to be part of this site. What's great about having a space that's dedicated to this is you don't have to see anything there if you don't want to. Once you're online on our community, you subscribe to spaces that you want to get information from that roll up into your global feed. Just like a lot of different, social media platforms. You decide what you see. You can turn it on, turn it off whenever you want to. So if you subscribe to opinion, you will see the feeds from opinion. If you don't subscribe, you won't. And maybe opinion will be successful. And maybe it'll branch out to be certain subgroups of opinions. I don't know. You all are deciding where this goes. You all are building this with me. The next 3 months, we are building out the uneven community. And if you sign on coming October 1st when we go live, you are part of that build-out. That's what I'm most excited about, is you are part of that build-out. And I really look forward to getting your input on this. So anyway, back to closing this out in our topic. I do have a couple notes on closing this out. So here's how I see it, and here's how I see about how do we handle when we talk, how we talk, why we talk, where we talk about these issues. This is how I see it. I'm probably wrong, like I already mentioned here, and I always want to mention that I know nothing. I actually thought I'd do a podcast one time called I Know Nothing, because I know nothing. All I'm telling you is things that I've seen, belief systems I have, but they change, and I'm not always right. I'm probably as often wrong as I am. But these are things that I think can help us have these conversations better, be less divided, and get back to where we can have friends with opposing viewpoints, and that's okay again. I'm old enough to know there was a time we had that. I had really close friends, and still do, but for a lot of people, they don't anymore. Have really close friends with opposing political ideologies. And that doesn't make sense to me, because then how do we learn? The internet really pushes this whole, you can choose what you see, which only leads to confirmation bias. So go out there and find an objective news source. And that's hard to do because, it's hard to find anything objective these days, I tell you right now. But try to find that, or even just try to subscribe or pay attention or follow or whatever to one place that's not your typical ideology. Just to learn from it, to explore it, to see what they're talking about. I've been trying to do that more and more to get a flavor, and I learned some things. So I think that's one thing. Another guideline is lead with kindness and respect. I think that's the number one, is lead with kindness and respect. No name calling, debate the issue, not the person. If somebody says something that just makes your blood boil, come back and say, I strongly disagree with that. That's okay. Versus calling them a name, yelling at them, or something else. You can say, I strongly disagree. Another one is remember the other person is so much more than that one opinion. We're writing people off completely for one opinion, or one sentence, or one word. Nobody is that basic. Be careful when you label somebody as one thing just because they said something. That's one sentence out of trillions they have said in their lifetime. Why are you judging just this one? Listen more than you speak. I heard a quote one time at some point that was, you learn nothing with your mouth open. It was something like that. I'm probably paraphrasing, so I apologize. But that you learn nothing with your mouth open, meaning while you're speaking, You're not hearing. You're not intaking any information. We need to listen first. Seek first to understand by listening. Be honestly curious about what the other person believes. If somebody says something that is diametrically opposed to your belief system, maybe come back to them and ask them one question. And I think this is a great way to lead a question is these words right here. These 4 words, or these 3 words. Help me understand. Help me understand. So somebody says, well, I believe that, I'm just going to throw something out here. I believe that cumin is the miracle spice for life, okay? And I'm probably even mispronouncing it. But I believe this is a miracle spice for life, and it will fix everything if you just eat this all the time. Maybe my response back to the person, as ridiculous as I think this is help me understand why you feel that way. Help me understand what you've read that leads you to believe that. Help me understand where that is coming from. Trust me, most people are more than happy to tell you why they believe something. Oh, there's my phone. Somebody's texting me. I'm going to close this out, then I'll get to you. Compartmentalize our lives, right? So be honestly curious about what other people believe. 2 more things here. Remember, you are most likely wrong too. As we just said earlier in this, is that don't forget, odds are at least part of what you are talking about and saying is incorrect. Is incorrect. Oh, and there's somebody else. Boy, all these different people that are, my phone's making all these noises. And so I'll have to start wrapping this up here real soon. I think my wife's almost ready to come home and they're probably on their way here. And so I'm going to have to wrap this up before she walks in. So just remember that parts of what you're thinking are probably wrong. And so there's always room to learn something new. Somebody isn't just woke. And somebody isn't just MAGA. There's so much more going on beyond that. And what I've learned by talking to people face to face that I've met, I really like these people. And we've even started talking some politics. And it's amazing how those conversations have gone. Amazing. We still disagree on some things, but we seem to like each other. That's kind of cool. Remember, this is another person who's dealing with anxiety and stress and life and relationships and politics and a lot of the same stuff you're dealing with, and is just trying to get through the day, and may have grown up as a different generation, or grew up in a different household, or grew up in a different school or different country, or as a different race or different gender. And that's okay. In fact, getting to know that person who's from someplace different, I think, is pretty cool. It increases my knowledge. I learn things. And you make some new friends. So anyway, I'm going to shut this down now. I talked about this much longer than I thought this one would be, but it's one I've been wanting to do for a long time. I've tried to record it before several times. I wanted to get it perfect. I now finally realize today I will never get this perfect, and I'll never get any podcast perfect. So all I can do is talk to you, start recording things, tell you my thoughts. I don't know if any of you think this way, but let me just share one last thing, and we'll go. I know I'm a relatively good person. I don't wish harm on really anybody that I can think of. I don't hate anybody or any group. I don't think I'm superior than anybody else due to my skin color or gender or job or education or genetics or family upbringing or anything. I think we're all melting pots of so many different circumstances. Nobody's better than the next person. I think I'm a good person. I think most of you probably feel the same way. That you're good people. And you don't really wish harm on somebody. And if that's true, and if we all really feel that way, then we'll sit here and sing Kumbaya. No, I'm just joking. I'm not going to go into that. I know. I know it's easy to suddenly feel like I'm going to be this, we're going to sit in a seance and all get along and pass the love. That makes me cringe sometimes. I mean, I get into meditation and I get into some of the Buddhist philosophy, but I'm also a guy who cringes at some of that too. I'm more than one thing. We all have some biases. We all have some prejudices. We're human. We all have them. All of us. It doesn't mean we can't get along. And it doesn't mean we can't work on some of those biases, work on some of those prejudices to help reduce them so we can get along. That's a soapbox. Boy, that was a big soapbox I was on. I am sorry. I am now. There we go. I'm walking around, as you can tell, talking to you. I'm stepping off the soapbox. Soapbox is going away. I am done with that. I don't know if this was good, not good, but it's one I've been wanting to record for a long time. And I'm hoping it is just the opening. I want to say opening salvo, but I think that's more of a military term, maybe not a good term to use. It's more of just the opening, let's put it that way, to a dialogue that we can take to our community, we can take to more of the podcast episodes, we can do with all kinds of stuff. I just want us to be able to talk about things. And that's the primary focus of our community, is so we all can get in, meet up, befriend each other, talk about things, and feel a little less alone in this world. If that's all Uneven does, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You know what? I love you all. And I thank you so much for listening to me ramble, because that's what this was. But thank you for listening to me ramble. You take care and you have a really good day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, this is Dee. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out our podcast. I do need to remind everyone that this podcast is for informational purposes only and should never be considered medical, psychological, or professional health advice of any kind. If you or someone you know is dealing with significant mental health issues, please seek professional help. Resources can be found in our show notes and on our website at unevenpodcast.com. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you on the flip side.